Wow, what a cool score, Alberto. I really, really love this. There's so many cool new ideas. Like, for instance, I really love this idea of the piccolo timpani playing this middle C, which is being doubled by double bass, and also, I guess you've got tempo block and whip playing at the same time. I'm wondering if you could just get the same effect without the whip if this were played as snap pizzicato. So, I mean, it would be actually a very, very high snap pizzicato on the double bass. So it might not be as effective as if it were played on the cello, where I think that just there would be a little less tension on the string at that height. But still, it's such a fun idea. Yeah. Um, yeah, some really cool stuff in here. And then, of course, the saxophones. So let's. This is actually my first evaluation for today. And I'm going to be doing quite a few today. So, so let's start off with our evaluation criteria and just talk about the first issue of pitch weight in the upper middle register of the piano, and how does that translate to the rest of the orchestra. I feel that in this case, even though you really do stick to the to the same exact register, the upper middle register of the orchestra, as opposed to the piano, I think that the tone picture is not as sort of trebly or shrill as it could be. And there's interesting textures in there. And you also can't have too low of an end if you want to get this effect right in here, right? You add a note here or there. There's some slight differences between part A1 and part A2, right? There are just a couple little tiny differences. But they're not really significant at all. So to all intents and purposes, these are more or less carbon copies. So that's like the next criterion, which is like thematic material repeats quite often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated exactly the same way throughout. So I mean, I just feel that you have such an interesting approach here that I kind of don't want to mess with it, or don't want to advise you to mess with it too much the second time around. And I think you have like these two notes here, and then you've got this fifth right in here, and there as well. So it's kind of not pizzicato right in here. So it's, other than that, it's not all that different. But if there was any just tiny little touch that you could throw in here, like maybe a low E on your timpani or something, or like if there was just some tiny little touch, right? Then I think it would be. I think that you could just say, as far as that was concerned, you had progressed the texture. Now let's look at the orchestration of these two sets of bars. This is such a cool idea. Yump 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 yada. Right, this flutter tonguing to sort of push into the second beat, and that's great. Yet dun dun dun. So you don't feel like you have to finish this yet dun 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 just because it goes yet dun 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 dun. You don't have to do it the second time. Yet dun 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 dun. Now this pitch right here does not really take anything away from the melody continuing on. But just, watch out. Like, you could have easily put too much weight on this B and made everything more about yenta dun 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 rather than yenta dun 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 dun. Right, like new statement right in here, new phrase, rather than having to, rather than thinking that because this B follows this little fragment, that means that you have to put in another B here, right? You don't have to. Yeah, and then, just really cool clarinet scoring in here. It's interesting that you have like right here, you have divisi staves, or you have different staves. It's not divisi, but you have separated staves for your clarinets. And you kind of didn't have to. You could have scored this first and second voice playing off of each other. But that it's not a wrong decision to make. What you did in here in terms of splitting these off, right? But if you needed more vertical space in order to introduce all the instruments of the orchestra at the same time, the additional, especially the saxophones which appear later, right? You could have easily doubled up, put both parts onto one staff without any problem at all. Okay, and then the doubling of the flutes with the violins, flute family with the violins. That's really cool. Keeping the piccolo down so that it doesn't tweedle too much going forwards. I think that's really cool. And then just the this higher cello. This is going to be a little tricky. Just reaching all the way up there, right? From an E down to a B. It would probably be easier to go up from E, from an octave lower E, because you've already got this pitch as a grace note here, right, in the oboes. So it's not really all that necessary to I think, for the cellos to play it. And it's just kind of damn uncomfortable. You could probably get a even better effect by having the violas play that, because it's much easier. But with the cellos, it's like, with top pro players, you get good intonation on that grace note. But with, your kind of average semi-pro community orchestra, it's going to be a little dodgy, right? So if that's your situation, then I would say, just, give your other players, right? Give players more situated in a more comfortable place that grace note. But other than that, I like the scoring of this. I like the violas and cellos, like very high violas and cellos, working with the middle winds right in here. The only thing I'm not too sold on is A2 bassoons way up there. I think, like, if you've got a soprano saxophone, you could have easily had like a A2 bassoons plus soprano saxophone, or first bassoon plus saxophone, or you could have had you also have tenor saxophone, which I'll have a little something to say about. I'm not going to try to talk you out of the tenor saxophone part, but I'm not going to try to push you towards putting tenor saxophone in certain places, because the person who's going to be talking you out of the tenor saxophone part is not me. It's going to be the orchestra manager, right? So that'll be like, they'll be looking through the score and they'll see the saxophone parts and they'll say, "Oh, we don't have the budget for this," right? That'll be their knee-jerk reaction, even if they do have the budget for it. Even if they have a third bassoon player who would happily play the saxophone part there, or a third clarinet player who would happily play one of the saxophone parts, then putting two in there, right? It's kind of skating on the edge of what is possible for some orchestras. Of course, a pro orchestra with a pro orchestra budget is not going to have any problem. But do you have those orchestras on tap, right? Anyhow, so I would say that, you see, the thing is that there really isn't any problem A2 tenor register bassoons doubling with cellos. So that's fine. And I've actually done that myself. So I'm not criticizing that and saying that is something that is bad to do. It's just that there are, you've got those saxophones, and I think that they are just a lot clearer and more dependable right in that register, and also stronger, right? You want some strength up there. And so the bassoons will be the sound, at best, A2 up there doubling the cellos is going to be a little coarse. It's going to be a little grainy. It's not going to have that sort of clear punch that the other instruments have. But it's still a cool idea. It's a cool sound. Don't get me wrong. It's something you have to change, right? But it's it's a little on the edge, I think, of what is desirable when you have other resources available, right? Okay. And then our next concern here is melodic development soaring quite high, and the accompaniment figures covering a wide range of pitches in wind register. So, like, you've really solved that beautifully right in here. With the clarinet as the obvious choice, and I like the way you split it between the instruments. I think that that's really effective. And then, like, you have the same general, more or less. I mean, that there are definitely differences between the two clarinet parts and the two middle string parts, but that's fine. Pizzicato matching the staccato and accents of the clarinets and so on. So that all works great. And then here, this accompaniment right in here, pretty much the same exact strategy, and I think it works pretty well. If yeah, see, so yeah, so no, that's all. It all works fine. It's fine. And I like the fact that you corrected. A lot of people didn't think to correct the ties here, just to a quarter note, and you did, and that was great. All right, so now to talk about the treatment of the melody. Yeah, I really like it a lot. I like how you introduce the B into here, and then you've got the doubling, like you have A2 here, and then you have the doubling of first and piccolo, and then you pick it up to A2 here in the flutes, and then soar up to here, and then you kind of skate back. So you're really keeping the melody absolutely perfectly balanced in the flutes. And that's very, very cool. And then, here you just have like marcato in the strings and so on, and that works good too. And you're sending your violinists fearlessly up to that high D. That's fine. And then here up to high E. Those are all playable, just so long as you are completely aware of the consequences of the kind of the slightly squeaky sound, right? When getting up to that high place. And then we have the kind of similar things happening here, thickening of the piccolo. That's an interesting turn of phrase. And then clarinets coming in under. You probably didn't need to have this trade-off here. You could probably just have both clarinets running, just sort of racing up to that top note. And as far as this is concerned, you could send up your flute players all the way up to A, and then drop down and double the clarinets and just keep them in the game, right, if you wanted to. But I really actually kind of like the way that we're going from E here, a sounding E here, to sounding E in the flutes. So, you don't really have to do what I just suggested. I actually kind of really like the differentiation here between timbres and the top note, right? So, and just really giving the melodic role here to the to A2 flutes. It's a slightly dangerous game here to have excuse me, to have your violins go at the same time as the flutes are going dun dun dun. It's just slightly blunting the effectiveness of the articulation here. And the same thing, dun, as opposed to dun, dun, dun. Just because of the absorptive abilities of the strings when doubling wind instruments, and especially violins doubling flutes, right? So that you really, like, what is going to be more audible here, even though you have this diminuendo sort of stuck in there, you really are going to, there's going to be a slight swallowing of the articulation effect right in here. But I mean, so it's good that you've got some other things going on in here. I would say, like, seeing as how you've got B-flat trumpet and horns below, just kind of barking away down here, and it's really nice that you have them balanced with forte. I still think that I don't think you need the diminuendo here. I think it's more important to match the articulation style of the winds, because there's just a danger here that the even suppressed as they are, that the brass will sort of take over right in here, with the way that you've got the strings kind of pussyfooting around and backed off. And then this is nice. Yeah, dun 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 dun. And then pluck dun dun dun. Yeah, dun 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 pluck. Yeah, dun 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 pluck. That's all real nice. And I like the way that you throw things to different top instruments, right? So flutes, then oboes, then this little oboe plus clarinet dance down towards the middle register of the orchestra. That's all very cool. So, my final assessment of this is, I'll give you a bit of a pass on kind of keeping everything in the same exact register, more or less, as it's scored, like just transcribing almost directly the registers of the piano score onto the orchestra, just because of just the really lovely way that it's orchestrated, right? You're skating right there on the edge, but I think it works really, really well. And then I like the shifts of color right in here. Not only do you have a textural contrast to previous stuff that's going on, but you also provide contrast within this next little phrase. And then this is also very, very cool too. The way that the instruments work forwards and so on, and double with the strings. About the only thing that I think that is lacking here is a little bit of finesse in the dynamics. I think you should start piano, push forwards to forte by here, so this can be forte, and then have a slight diminuendo into the mezzo forte of the following page, right? So just a slight diminuendo here at the end. That's my little dashed diminuendo that I provided in the template. And and that would help you to transition more smoothly into section B. Now, here at section B, let's quickly go over the beginning of the evaluation criteria. So, contrast of color, breadth of texture, and middle register scoring, you're certainly supplying that. You're not getting stuck into any one very simple groove from the beginning. Maintaining differentiated roles in closely spaced melodies and overlapping accompaniment figures, highlighting inner voices. For the most part, that's all pretty effective. I'll have a couple of comments in a second about some of this. Keeping the high interjecting notes from sounding too glaringly repetitive. I think it's kind of nice the way that you have set up these chirps. Right, we've got this little tweet, tweet, and then this little kind of punch right in here. I mean, about the only thing that I would say is problematic here is the soprano saxophone. I would score that like mezzo forte or softer, right? I just would have it. I would try to, if you really want the harp to play a role in here, you just really have to bring down the soprano saxophone. Oboes and flutes, pizzicato of the violins, those things. It's really the pizzicato of the violins that will kind of defang the harp as well, right? That's even more of a problem. And the same thing is true here. Like you're putting in the harp there because you feel that the harp is going to bolster the pizzicato, or maybe vice versa. You feel that the pizzicato is going to bolster the harp. Well, really what is going to happen here is the pizzicato is going to eliminate the harp, right? I mean, the mock-up is telling you the truth. Listen to the mock-up. You barely can hear the harp right in there, or maybe not at all, right? So if you're not going to hear the harp and you really want the pizzicato, then I would say leave it out. If you want the more delicate sound of the harp, then leave out the pizzicato and try to suppress the other elements so that they're not so loud, and then the harp will come through really nicely. However, seeing as how you've got a snare drum hit on forte here, I think it's better to just eliminate the harp. Or leave the harp in at fortissimo and just with an accent and just hope for the best, right? But it still is not going to be very much of a contribution to the sound picture here. Here we have little blops and bleeps of tenor saxophone. And the tenor saxophone is more or less doubling the bassoons right in here and so on. And it doesn't really have much of an independent role until we get to right in here. And there's some playing right in here that could easily go to other instruments, oboes or second violins plus oboes or something like, or plus bassoons. So I'm just going to point out a few places where I think that if you get sort of backed up against a wall trying to get this performed, and people are saying, look, we can ask one of our clarinet players to play soprano sax for you, but I just don't think we can get two saxophones here, then I think you can easily transfer the tenor sax to another part, and especially in light of something else I'm going to bring up in a minute, okay? So stay posted for that. So just looking at the way that this is all scored, I really love the trumpet coming in and doing the, bum, 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 da, 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 dum. That's really nice. And then da, 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 in sort of answering a tu soli in the horns. That's very, very cool. And the little rumble, little pushing right in here from the timpani. All very cool. Now, right in here, like horns doubling the violas. It's really going to be all about the horns here. The violas would have to be like forte to really compete with what's going on. In fact, I would say, like, you could score everything forte here, except for the horns, right? And I think that it would be just a better blend. Yeah, it's kind of cool the way that you've sort of thrown in you've broken apart the eighth note pattern right in here between the double basses and the cellos. It's very cool. Now, when you get right here, dun, 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 dun. Now, I think that, like, the way that you're scoring this, you're very aware that that is one line going across, and the way that you've divided it between the players is pretty nice. It's nicely intuitive. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I mean that'll all work really nicely. There will be a really decided trade-off in timbre here. Like you can hear it in the mock-up, and you'll really be able to hear it in the in a live orchestra kind of a situation. So one way of dealing with this might be to have the clarinets come in a little earlier and have the bassoons go on a little bit farther, right? And then the bassoons just sort of start to pull out and the clarinets ease in, right? So that you get the blended texture of the line and trading off gradually to clarinet rather than just trading off or dovetailing on a single note. And that would sort of keep the integrity, the timbral integrity of the line together. But I mean, if you want a more kind of brutal trade-off, see, one of the problems is that you're trading off on exactly the same note in both parts, right? So it really is cellos and bassoons, violins and clarinets, right? So that shift between those two sounds is just really obvious. So if you're happy with that, then that's what you get. But if if there are different ways of doing it, you can trade off at a different place. Like, for instance, you could have the violins trading off on the A and the clarinets trading off on the C sharp. There are a bunch of different ways of doing this so that it isn't really just so, like, the seam between the changeover isn't quite so obvious. All right, and then this stuff in here is all nicely done. Tenor sax plus bassoon and so on, and viola. Dun, 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 dun. And then once again, you're trading off from bassoons and cellos to clarinets. I mean, in this place right in here, you could easily have the clarinets play everything, right? You couldn't quite have the violins play everything, but you could have the violas play everything. So yeah, so once again, I would say just try to trade off on different notes so that the seam isn't so glaring right in here. All right, now the thing about the piano part, like you may see on the page that this line ends on a written B because that's what it looks like. Like you see the end of the staff as I wrote it in the template, and then the next note in the right hand part appears to be completing that line on a B. But if you listen to the piano players turn the top voice into an inner voice of yada da dum. Right, so you really are this yap ba 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 da da dum, right? And you've marked this fortissimo. Perhaps you were listening to it in the mock-up and it just wasn't coming through very, very much. So one of two things will happen. Either this will be just as weak as it's sounding in the mock-up and you'll still not be able to hear it very well, or the tenor saxophone player will get a little bit of urging from the conductor and they'll just suddenly, like, you'll have this beautiful perfect line, and all of a sudden you hear this yada da da, right? So I think you need some work on this. Rethink this. Imagine that the line ends with a triplet. So if you imagine that the line ends with a triplet, there's no need for the clarinets to replicate the B of the bassoons. There's no need to dovetail from these parts. Have the clarinets finish A2, yada da dum, and have them doubled by a string instrument. They're you're kind of looking at it. Really, the most obvious instrument to be playing that is the viola, right? So you can have this note in your violas played by the second violins, right? And just have the violas double the clarinet part. And you can have the tenor sax play along if you like. But really, you kind of need that weight, right? That is just a little bit more, right? Without the timbre getting too crispy right in there suddenly, right? Because you want this line to end smoothly in a triplet while dovetailing, the whole ending of this phrase with the triplet dovetails into the beginning of the melody, right? On the B. So, so when the tenor sax either fades into nothing, we lose the pasting together of these two overlapping lines, or suddenly, if the tenor sax is too loud, it just suddenly just dominates everything, and we don't really hear the emphatic beginning of the melody here. All right, so rant over. The next problem here is keeping the triplets from overwhelming the melodic line, and not so much this one, but da-da-dum, 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 right? So just keeping this from being too prominent. Now here you're giving it to the cellos, and I feel that that is a fairly good place to put them at the beginning. And I think that there is zero problem with this being doubled by some wind instrument or other. I think that it's actually kind of a shame, that they're, you've got instruments that aren't being used that could be supplying yada da 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 da, just a little bit of doubling, a little bit of thickening to the cellos right in here, because it's almost a slightly reverse problem. The melody is almost overwhelming the triplets. Not quite, but I just don't know if cellos alone are enough to carry that the triplets right in here without any kind of doubling from anybody. Seeing as how you start off with three instruments playing the melody, A2 bassoons going up into the tenor register once again. Okay, so all right, so look everybody, try not to send A2 exposed bassoons up into the tenor register. Now, once again, these are all being doubled by other instruments, so it's not as much of a problem. But it still could be problematic in certain instances. Like for instance, like here you've got them doubled by the first horn, so or A2 horns, I guess, if this is still A2 soli, if this is still intended to be A2. So there's no problem about intonation or about just kind of peculiarity of sound or anything like that. But then here it's becoming more exposed as it's just first violins, right? And then the extreme pungency of the sound, the kind of edginess of the sound is taken out. So that in itself is a problem, right? Because so now like it is a really like taking them out is almost like a sudden drop in the power and the edginess of that tenor sound. So so you are replacing that with clarinet, right? And I feel that if you are going to be pulling out from mezzo piano bassoons, quieting down to piano here, I don't think that pianissimo in the clarinet is enough enough strength, right? I think that it should be piano here. If you want to trade off, and you are suddenly losing that edgy quality, that is, in my feeling I just feel it's dangerous to have A2 bassoons exposed way up there. I think that you could get kind of the same exact effect with just a single bassoon right in here. Like, so I would say A2 bassoons, it's fine, yes or no, it's all the same to me. A2 bassoons and a single horn, right? Or a single bassoon and a single horn. And then here, just a single bassoon plus the first violins, and then trading off to a single clarinet at piano, doubling the violins, not two clarinets. And same thing here. Like I would say a single flute, I think would be better, right? It just because there will be a tendency for the like with that individual sound of the flute, it's actually more audible than if you have A2 flutes, because the A2 flutes with a sort of homogeneous blended sound can get absorbed better, I feel, by the strings. So if you really want the flute on top to come through more as an individual instrument, I think it should be a single flute. Right? And then here we push up, and then we have the arc of the piccolo right in here. So you're ticking all of these boxes really nicely, by the way. Keeping the triplets from being overwhelmed, that's great. The widely reaching left hand patterns, and here in the double basses, this is all perfectly fine, especially with the standard bass, because this is just an open E, right? So all they have to do is go finger these two notes and then hit the open E right in here, and then this is an open D string, right? And then so there are lots of possible things. Like here, like we've got the open G right in here, so still not as many notes to finger, and then this is all simple, right? Yeah, and that's all really easy for the cello. About my only gripe here is that I feel like hanging on the C here is the wrong note to hang on to, right? So like by playing this C and just sort of it's obscuring the line of the triplets. As much as I tend to disagree with people who are doing this da 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 kind of thing, where they're playing the C and then the B and hanging on to the B. I don't totally agree with that, but I think that would actually work better than the C, right? Because it's not like you're making it into a C third, but the harmony here is this is a passing tone to B, right? C, B, E. So just by hanging on to the C, it kind of clouds the simplicity of the line right in here, right? So I think it would be better to go, if you have to reinforce this C, either make it just an eighth note, like really just a tiny little pulse, or go C, B, C, B. All right, and that leads to this bar right here. So the first bar, just one thing I forgot to mention. The last concern on the evaluation criteria of keeping the textural contours fresh and not too much the same, that's also very nicely handled here with the shifts in color in the melody line. So yeah, that is just very, very cool. Yeah, yeah, really nice. Okay, so first bar of C, and thank you for maintaining my somewhat illogical positioning of this rehearsal mark. I really appreciate that. So I my only problem with this is I don't feel that you crescendo fast enough. So you have to imagine that you have tons of time here, right? It's almost half the tempo of the previous bar, even with a ritardando. So we have an even slower, like on top of this, we're going even slower. If you consider that there is piano pedal happening here, and the piano pedal is intended to sustain every pitch as the pianist's hands go over all of the notes that are playing, right? So in some cases you are like, for instance, you are tying these this D here, right? And then of course like this low E and so on. So there are some pitches that are being held. If you really, really wanted to make this all about strings and just completely, you can still do that. You can still hold on to each note as you go up. You just need to have some divisi in there. So you could play the note and then have the upper divisi part play the next note while the first note while the lower divisi player holds on to the note and sustains it forward. So I think that just sustaining everything forward, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is crescendo to very, very, it's crescendo to sforzando in the part, right? And then afterwards he says, hey, it's going to be forte or whatever. And you have scored mezzo forte as your dynamic for the beginning of section C. And that's all cool. The what I think would be really effective here is if you really pushed things, if you held on, sustained the pitches as you went upwards. That's like number one. And then just really just trust me that this is going to be a very long, slow allargando, and just crescendo up to forte or sforzando right by the time you get to the third beat, and then instead of crescendoing further, had a slight diminuendo. Then you get what I feel is the ideal approach here is a convincing allargando expansion and a smooth release into bar 49. Doppio più lento, right? Now here, going on, at the beginning of the next real musical section, I feel like there's some really beautiful stuff going on here. I love the idea of throwing in the guitar here. I think that that's a great idea. I love the idea of the harmonics, if indeed these harmonics are intended to sound an octave higher. Now, if you're intending for this to be the sounding pitch, then that's not going to work, because you would be asking the harp player to form a harmonic node or form a harmonic pluck on the string down an octave from here, and that's just kind of not possible. The lower you go below the staff on the harp, the harder it is for it to really have any kind of coherent harmonic. It just the sound starts to blend in with the overall sound of a larger string. So pretty much inside the staff is the, I would say like maybe from this low G maybe up to A is, so if this were intended to be played on the, if this is the intended pitch, right, then that's fine. Excuse me, the intended note to be played, the pitch of the note intended to be played rather than heard, then that's fine. And the same thing goes here. Like if you intended it to sound a harmonic at this pitch, it's still too low, like going down to that low D, maybe the E flat, but still just like, so anyway, But if this is intended to sound an octave higher, then that's cool, because then you have this this A right here, and then the B flat and the A at pitch, and then the B flat and the A sounding harmonically higher, and that's very, very cool. And then like the same thing here. I have to say that the use of the harp in here is just really beautiful, but I wouldn't be scoring the guitar and the harp, at different dynamic levels. I would have them the same dynamic level. I would have everybody mezzo forte here. Especially considering that soprano saxophone is going to be just an immensely loud instrument compared, like in terms of its projection compared to these other instruments. You might even have a better chance scoring everything forte, right? Or poco forte, and having the soprano sax scored piano espressivo. Now, here you've chosen to include the text right here, well sung, very expressive, and so on. However, like, that is something that you need to show us in the part, right? Like, rather than writing this out, and that's something that the pianist, right, is basically the orchestra, right? They are the conductor and the orchestra, and so Falla is telling them this as an orchestral suggestion, right? For them, as they're the kind of the person involved with making all the decisions. However, you are the orchestrator, so you have to show us what this means with the orchestra itself, right? So especially with the melody. So, and you're not, right? We just have a couple of hairpins here and there. This should have many nuances in it. You should be not afraid to even change the dynamic, just to really exaggerate the fluctuation. You should really think out. Do you really want like a tiny little bit of crescendo here? And what about here? No nuances for this either? Think about it. All right, so just imagine this line. Sing it to yourself. Da 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 da. You could crescendo and diminuendo here, and then you could crescendo here, and this could be portato, right? So by that I mean this, right? So just adding a slur over the top, so that each note pulses, right? And then crescendo into it, diminuendo. And then same thing here, crescendo here, and then more crescendo, and then have the diminuendo here, and then push again. So crescendo, diminuendo, crescendo, right? Da, diminuendo, da da da, now crescendo, da 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 da, then diminuendo, da 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 da, right? And this could almost be like diminuendo, like if, let's say, your dynamic was mezzo forte, right here, mezzo piano, da 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 da, and then push into a forte here, da 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 da. Right, so it has just got to be emphatic right here. And then here you have the echo, in the tenor sax. Okay, so here I just would really recommend, once again, like, add some Q notes in another part. Like if you want this to be clarinets, I would say maybe A2 clarinets in the Chalumeau register, right? That would be a nice contrast. Or maybe even A2 clarinets in the Chalumeau register doubled by violas, arco, right? Because you may not get that tenor sax as much as you want it. And then, same comments here, right? Da 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 da, ba 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 da da da. All right, now you've taken out my little suggestions here, but you have left them in. Like you've left in the little changes, right? So seriously, I think you do have to tell the if these fluctuations are intended to really be part of the score, you got to tell the conductor, right? Because let's okay. So let's tie up the evaluation of this page. Just in terms of commentary, like I think that this is all really nicely done in terms of the accompaniment. Right in here, I feel that you should be increasing, right? This should be a dramatic moment. Right? So I think that the guitar should go to forte here, and it should be just really punchy. Do you know what I mean? And then like crescendo, and then crescendo again, and then pull back to a mezzo forte again. I just really think there is like the energy in here. Like we have this nervous on the edge kind of energy, and then it just has to burst out, right, and then get pulled back in. And that will make it really feel true to Falla's. Falla had that fire inside him, but he almost never. He kept it in check, and then he would just let it burst out, and it would be exactly the right moment to do it, right? Because he really understood the music of the culture he was drawing on, like few other composers. So, just looking at the evaluation criteria, careful treatment of the melodic voice to make it feel authentic to the composer's style. I don't think that Falla would have scored a soprano saxophone here, but that doesn't matter. I think that it is still, you can make it feel authentic by making it more nuanced, by being willing to just really play around with the dynamic strength and the drama, and by some of the things I'll wrap up with here in terms of the sense of restraint and so on, leading to a burst of energy. We'll talk about that in a second. Keeping the accompaniment from becoming too regular and too predictable. Well, you're kind of keeping it in the back, and you're keeping it in plucked instruments, and if you put enough drama into the solo part, then you don't have to worry about the accompaniment part getting too predictable. So I think that's that you are dealing with that in a different way, once again, and that's fine. Okay, so let's talk about this line, and let's talk about those last two concerns before changing the screen. So did you notice in the piano part there is like a poco rallentando? It's not. Hang on. I want to sort of select this. See, so you have a accelerando here, but what did the pianist do? Da 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 da. So this is sort of an echo, right? And then here is when they put on the energy, da 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 da, right? And then da 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 da. So I think you need to. Yeah, and then here, like, so I think that accelerando has to come earlier, right? And then when you get to here, I think, just with respect, you're sort of changing things around to suit yourself, and that's fine. I think this is where rubato needs to happen, right? Because you're telling the conductor and the players that they can stretch a little bit. And if you have a fermata here, you need one here. And then a little bit of a accelerando here. Right? I mean, it's just really got to be, insanely dramatic music here. But, as far as like the orchestration of everything right in here, that's all cool. Like just some very simple doublings, cellos, clarinets, and so on. I think that you could have had a more concerted push right in here. Just a little bit more, I mean, I just think that there could have been more, it could have been more of an orchestral statement rather than a solo statement. right? It, like you could almost make this like just give the soloist a break here and just have the orchestra take over some of these things, trade off, and then come back in with your solo voice right in here. Anyway, just it's all just a matter of proportions. I think your proportions are fine though. I'm not going to tell you to change anything, but it's just like possible alternative if you want to freshen things up, so that there's more contrast and more drama, right? And this is all fine. Yeah, that's nice. So poco affrettando. Just want to see something here. Right, so you have the accelerando. So poco affrettando doesn't mean to like get more and more fretted, right? I think the accelerando has to be very, very clear, right? So I think he's saying, I want the music to be, disturbed right in here and fretted, it has to be tense and it has to be, but I don't think he's really saying necessarily to accelerate. I don't think that that's the exact context, but so I think the accelerando needs to be a little clearer right in there. Now, right in here, I don't think the harp is going to be very successful competing with the brass. So just kind of, maybe make it more emphatic within the strings. This kind of function, and maybe bassoons could help out a little bit too. All right, so right in here, I think that this all works pretty well. So shouldn't this be? Let me drag this in. Shouldn't this just be this, right? Right in here. All right. So, it's like the only objection that I've got here really is, do we want this beautifully smooth bassoon line to be happening during this agitato, right? So, because the bassoonists don't sound agitated at all. They sound beautiful and smooth and suave and everything else. They're making a nice arc right here with just, meanwhile, it's the cellos really who are the ones who are being agitated. So I think that if you have a situation where the double basses below are not playing pizzicato, and they're not supplying anything to the music that has a kind of a spiky kind of a tense, agitated sort of a feeling, and then on top of that you've got bassoons A2 playing nice and smoothly, I think that it's really going to become about, it's because of the smoothness of the line and the tracking from below of simple bowed eighth notes, it will distract from the energy of the cellos right in here. So you might want to rethink this. Even just simply having them play staccato might be enough to just add, to keep it agitated, rather than really just having the bassoons take over right in here. So that leads to our next part of the music. Più meno, poco rubato, and just sort of maintaining that kind of dreamy feeling right in here. Just almost like the party is getting to be too much for the party goers. Whether it is high spirits or whether it is chemical spirits that are making wood alcohol spirits, whether it's making people sort of hallucinate mentally, or if they're just, their sense of exhaustion and exuberance is just starting to collect into one reeling kind of a feeling, then one way or another, I think we need to express that in the music. And I think that this is a nice start, like really, really soft flutes and clarinets, and together with the strings, of course, it's really, these are just providing some cushion, some harmonic cushion. They really are not going to be all that audible for their own sake. If you want them to be audible for their own sake, then it's better, for instance, to have maybe this played by oboe or something like that to make this stronger and warmer. But it's okay just so long as things don't get too loud yet, right? So at the beginning here, this is working fine with these low flutes and so on. Okay, and I like the positions of everything, the little support of the bassoons, and once again, I just feel this would be better off as staccato. Bop, 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 bop. Right, but I mean, like here you're going cellos and you're going slurred cellos and violas. Here you've got your measured tremolo in the violas and the slurred cellos below. So but I mean, once again, you've got the slurred bassoons playing at the same exact pitch as the violas, so I just feel that they're distracting from the sense of energy right in here. And I love the little touches from the double bass, or excuse me, and I love the little touches from the bass drum right in here. That's very cool. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of wonder whether or not you're holding off on your brass a little bit. Like, could the brass come in to start coloring things a little bit, like almost as a kind of a background pad, or just very, very, very lightly adding a little bit of strength in the middle, and then coming in stronger here, kind of more scorching. I just sort of feel that like the distance from here to there, right, is not. It just doesn't feel like it is pushing very hard. I think it's also interesting that there's fortissimo in the piano part, and here you're saying forte. So forte with expansion. So the expansion, once again, this is something that's up to the orchestrator. It's not up to the musicians, right? You have to provide the expansion, right? So the Falla is telling the pianist, I want you to play in a really, just a very, very powerful, I want your hands to be percussive here. I want it to expand the sound of the piano, right? So it's really it's an instruction to the pianist as a performer and as, like, once again, the kind of virtual conductor. So that is something you can seize on as an orchestrator and make part of your orchestration, right? But you don't have to tell each individual player, hey, expand here, right? You should be the one expanding the music for them, right? Now, I'm kind of looking at this and I'm thinking, like, why couldn't the brass be forte, but the winds and the strings be fortissimo, right? And then maybe you can have the piccolo on top playing forte with the trill so that it doesn't get to be too piercing. Yeah. So I just think that would be a better balance, because it says fortissimo. I mean, so it just seems a bit strange that we're saying with expansion here, and yet we're not going to fortissimo as it suggests in the piano score. So yeah, so it would just balance things better right here. Like if you have your violas playing fortissimo, and you have your and then I would say brass and saxophones have them marked down one dynamic notch. This is kind of nice in here. I like this boom, boom, boom. That's all cool. You don't have to change that. And this that right in here. I like that. That's very nice. Then glockenspiel on high. Nobody's going to hear this unless it is marked like at least forte or fortissimo. The glockenspiel is, once again, that can just really get absorbed by the sound of the orchestra. This pitch right here is going to hit ding, and an octave higher than the violins, at the same pitch as the piccolo, right? So you're accentuating the beginning of this, and then so if it's still mezzo forte here, it's just going to disappear, right? So, but if you want it to be a strong accompaniment to the piccolo, like at pitch, then it really has to be up to the same dynamic level. So if we push everything up to fortissimo in the winds and strings, this could also be fortissimo, and so can the glockenspiel. So forte here in both parts, crescendo to fortissimo. Obviously, crescendo doesn't mean anything on a held glockenspiel note. So just forte, fortissimo here. And then I think that this will work a whole lot better. It'll be nicely balanced, and the brass players can really play out instead of kind of getting the hairy eyeball from the conductor all the time. Same with the saxophones. But I really love the piccolo trills above. All right, bum, 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 bum. So the agitato should start on the eighth note, right? And give yourself a little comma here, a little pausa, right? So just, and you've got everybody stopping on the eighth note, right? So perfect. There are no quarter notes holding across or pushing across. So just put a little comma right here and put the agitato right there, okay? And then, because like this is just really bum, 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 bum. You don't want to think dun, 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 dun. All of a sudden we're really, really fast right on the first beat. No, it's not that at all, right? Dun, 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 dun. Done. But put this in system text. Right. And this is all nicely done. Absolutely nothing wrong with this. This all works fine. It's all great. You're pushing your double basses up there into that high region, but it's all going to work fine. It's going to work. It's all great. No problems at all. And I like the way that this kind of wraps up at the end. You don't have to bring in the ritardando. I mean, yeah, so here you're kind of making this word do a lot of work. Yeah. Kind of just, I want to know what you've got hidden. Right, so you have a rallentando. You know, I mean, I kind of feel it just sort of kind of starting maybe in the middle of the bar, right? Because I think that you need to let this idea develop, you know. I think that if you start a little too early, then we can't get enough energy out of this phrase, right? I think right there is where to put it if you want to make it all one thing. And then this was really nice, the way that this, you know, it slowed down enough to bridge into the next passage. One last thing to just point out here is that I really love how you did the double staccato for the measured tremolo right in here. That's really great. I mean, that is the way to do it if you have to mark every note. You probably don't have to. I mean, I think that, you know, by the time you get to here, you can just leave it out, right? And then the same thing right in there. You can just leave these ones out. But darn it, it's just so nice that it was in there, right? To see it notated correctly, that is great. That's very cool. All right, and now we've got solo violin. One thing that's kind of interesting about this is that I feel this could have been played just as beautifully, and perhaps even more powerfully and poignantly, on solo cello, right? Sending a solo cello all the way up there to G sharp is absolutely no problem. You know, it just could be so beautiful, and then you get the tension, but the beauty, right, and the very, you know, just very high tenor register right in there, as opposed to sort of kind of middle soprano register for the violin, anyways. You know, the violin soprano register is, you know, it's huge, right? So for the violinist, it's really kind of right in the middle, and it can be very sweetly expressed. And, you know, it's a shame that mock-up solo violin sounds, just really have not grasped that sound. Now, once again, mezzo forte, con espressione, whatever, or espressivo. I think you need to write that in, right? Da 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 dum, ba 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 bum. And look, this is portato, isn't it? Right? Right? And what would be more beautiful there? A nice pulsing sound with a crescendo under it. Da diminuendo, and then maybe no portato here. Crescendo. Da, da, slight diminuendo. Da, da, and then piano espressivo. Da, 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 da. And then crescendo right in here, right? Where's the crescendo? Right? That's written into the original melody. Da, 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 da. You could like crescendo up to mezzo forte here, and then come back in mezzo piano. Da, 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 da. Now this is just absolutely heavenly. I'm kind of curious as to why the guitar isn't playing all of the pitches that the harp is, right? But I mean, it's still really nice. Yeah, just really lovely. The clarinets trading off on the bottom part and the flutes trading off on the upper part. And a little commentary from the piccolo, and then just this, these little call and response things happening. Oh, just lovely. Such a great idea of how you scored this. That's one of the standout examples of scoring section E, the poco più lento. Also, the little touches of glockenspiel in there. That's so cool. And right in here, we come to our next concern, conveying a sense of icy distance. Here you're saying with mutes. But what if you said, like, what if you wrote in here, like what if you made lointain the part of the tempo mark, part of the system text, and then wrote non-vibrato under everybody's part, so triple P non-vibrato. So instead of, da 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 da, you got da 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 da, just like absolute icy cold. So you have to think, like, what is happening in our little story. You danced your you danced your life away at the party, and you met your favorite person, and you got into this boat, and you sailed off, or you went off down the river, and the beautiful, you're going slowly down the river in this boat, and you can hear the sounds of the night around you, and the air is perfumed, and it's warm and everything, and you get a certain distance away, things start to get cool, and you look back over your shoulder, and then far away on that mountaintop, on that hillside, you can see the party still going on, but everything is soaked in moonlight, and it's just icy, right? So, I don't know, maybe I'm just reading too much into this, but that's just kind of what I feel thinking about it. And so just as the icier, the better, I would say. So just like non-vibrato, I think would just make everything really just absolutely straight, and almost cutting like a sharp icicle. And then we really need a rallentando here. Yes. Yeah. So ritardando. I think it should happen, right there. And then put the a tempo right here. Right. Da, 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 dum. We're going to intimate here. It's, and it's nice to come back to our violin solo. With the horns, a lot of people are using clarinets, including me. Horns are great. I'd say pianissimo, diminuendo to triple P is a better balance here for being under the bassoons and blending with this, And this is cool, like bringing in the harp and then having the guitar hit those low E's and everything else. I think this works just beautifully well. Like a lot of your subtle textures are wonderfully managed. And as we sort of are wrapping this up, I'm just thinking more and more how perfect the 2022 selection for the 2022 orchestration challenge selection is going to be. I think there will be inspirations, right? I'm not saying that the piece is anything like this, but there are certain resonances of this with the selection that I have chosen for the next one, which I think is just going to bring out wonderful, like people who are interested in beautiful, discrete, subtle textures are going to come alive in their scoring. And this is all just very beautifully done. Then da-dum, bum. So why does this have to end? Why can't it just keep going? Because the piano part, like all of the sounds are going to hold on until the pedal lifts here on this bar, right? So da-dum, and then bing, but this is still going dum. I think you can keep holding. And I think you can just leave this tied, like leave these pitches tied across the bar, and that way the harpist won't get the impulse to damp them with her right hand, right? And then just with their right hand, and the stuff at the bottom. So wonderful. Yeah, so a great score. Really nicely done, Alberto. And you have been a familiar face, a familiar voice with these orchestration challenges for quite a while. And, it's hard for me to say, oh, you're getting better and better, because you always were good, right? But this is just showing some wonderful imagination and some very individual kind of sense of purpose and voice and everything else. So I think you should feel very, very proud of this, and I'm so happy that you were able to participate this time, and you better participate next time because I think that next selection is going to have a lot of meaning for you. Okay, so with that, without stretching out this little outro too much, I'm going to thank you very much for your contribution and just, for helping ennoble this entire exercise, and for being such a great support on Patreon and the Orchestration Online community, and of course to all my other patrons and everybody else out there who is sticking with these evaluations, watching them through to the end, voicing your thoughts, and sharing this post, giving us some reactions and comments and so on. That's all really important, and I really appreciate just how healthy we're showing that the Orchestration Online community is. I think you guys are making it one of a kind, and I appreciate that so very, very much. So on to the next evaluation for me. Have a really great day.